hungry for justice inside America's brutal prison food punishment system. The screaming started the moment the metal food slot slammed shut. Inside the isolation cell, an inmate named Daniel stared down at the thing sitting on his tray. A dry brown block called the loaf. It looked like a brick. It smelled like old bread mixed with mashed vegetables and mystery spices. And it tasted worse than it looked. The prison officer told him he would be eating this for days, maybe weeks, as punishment. No choice, no change, no questions. Daniel took one bite, gagged, and spit it out on the floor. "Eat it," the guard said, "or go hungry." This wasn't just happening to him. All down the row, men were banging on their cell doors, begging for real food, begging for medical help, or begging for someone outside to hear what was happening to them. This was the moment that would later spark a real investigation into how prisons in the United States used food as punishment. But right now, inside that dark, narrow cell, Daniel didn't know any of that. He only knew his stomach hurt, his head felt hot, and the loaf in front of him felt like a slow kind of torture. And then, before he could even swallow a second bite, something happened that changed everything. Something that would make the entire prison explode with noise and fear. A man at the far end of the block collapsed. The guards didn't rush in. The food slot stayed closed. Daniel whispered, "Someone is dying." But nobody came. That moment was only the beginning. Before everything reached this breaking point, the story had started years earlier, long before Daniel ever stepped foot inside a prison. Food punishment wasn't new. It had been quietly used in different states for years. Officers said it kept order. Inmates said it broke people down.
It began showing up in lawsuits from places like Vermont, where prisoners said the loaf made them sick. In New York, men said they were fed moldy loaves until they vomited. In Arizona, Sheriff Joe Arpaio forced inmates to eat food so old and spoiled it became national news. And in Pennsylvania, inmates wrote that their punishment meals made them weak and dizzy. But the public didn't know the full story. Not yet. Daniel's story began when he entered the prison system at age 28. He expected prison to be strict. He expected rules. But he didn't expect the food to be used like a weapon. Before punishment started, the meals were already terrible. Watered-down oatmeal, gray meat, bread so dry it crumbled in his hands. But when inmates argued with guards or broke small rules, things got worse. The punishment food came with no warning, no hearing, no chance to speak, just a knock on the door and a tray with that same cold loaf, twice a day, every day. Some men refused to eat it. Some forced themselves to swallow it because the hunger hurt more. Some grew thin. Some got sick. Daniel watched it all happen. The worst part wasn't the taste. The worst part was knowing this was done on purpose. It was meant to break people, to silence them, to make them obey. But starving men don't stay silent forever. As days passed, whispers spread through the block. Someone outside had finally heard about the punishment food. Someone was asking questions. Someone was digging. The inmates didn't know who. A lawyer, a reporter, a family member. But then, one night, just as hope began to grow, the guards delivered news that froze Daniel's blood. Everyone on punishment diet extended, indefinite. No end date, no reason, just more suffering. And the next morning, something happened in the block that none of them could undo. The sound hit first, a heavy crash that echoed through the block like metal on bone. Daniel shot up from his bunk, his stomach twisting from hunger and fear. The prison was never quiet, but this noise was different. It wasn't an argument. It wasn't a guard yelling orders. It sounded like someone had slammed into a door with full force. Then came the shouting, "Inmate down! Inmate down!" Voices ran in both directions, fast and panicked.
Daniel pressed his face to the narrow window in his cell door, trying to see anything. All he could make out were shadows moving, guards rushing, and one voice begging, "Help him, please help him." It was the same man who had collapsed the day before after being fed only Nutriloaf for weeks. His body had been getting weaker every day, and now it looked like his strength had completely given out. 3 guards surrounded him, but none of them opened a door to pull him out. They yelled instructions, but they didn't go inside. Daniel couldn't understand why. Every second felt longer than the last. Finally, an officer shouted for medical staff, but the prison was slow. The response always was. Time dragged, and the hallway fell into a strange silence that made Daniel's heart race. For a moment, he wondered if the man was still alive. But then, without warning, a guard turned toward the cells and yelled, "All punishment diets continue until further notice. No exceptions." The words felt like a punch to the gut. It meant more Nutriloaf, more sickness, more hunger. Daniel knew something inside the block was building. Tension hung in the air like thick smoke. Nobody could handle much more, and it didn't take long for the breaking point to come. 2 cells down, an inmate named Harris snapped. Harris had been on the punishment diet even longer than Daniel. His hands shook constantly, and his eyes had grown dark and hollow. When the next loaf arrived through the food slot, he didn't pick it up. He didn't look at it. Instead, he grabbed it, crushed it in his fist, and threw it back through the slot with a scream that shook the whole tier. "Enough! We're not animals!" In seconds, men across the block joined in, banging, shouting, kicking their doors. The noise was so loud it vibrated through the concrete floor. Daniel felt the pressure building, like a bomb about to explode. The guards stormed down the hallway in riot gear, shouting orders nobody followed. Shields slammed, boots stomped, flashlights swung wildly.
For a moment, everything turned into chaos. Daniel didn't scream with the others. His voice was too tired. His body felt too weak. But he watched everything, knowing something big was coming. And he was right. Because while the guards were trying to control the noise, someone 2 tiers above had done something that the officers completely missed. Someone had slipped a note through the bars and into the hands of a worker inmate, one of the few allowed to move from block to block. A note begging for help. A note describing the punishment food, the sickness, the collapse, and the suffering. By the time the guards realized what had happened, the worker had already disappeared into another hallway, and that note was already on its way outside the prison, towards someone willing to reveal the truth. But the guards didn't know that yet, and in their anger, they made a decision that would push the entire block over the edge. The next meal would not be Nutriloaf. It was something even worse. And when Daniel saw what they placed on his tray the next morning, his stomach turned in fear. The tray hit the floor with a loud metal clang that snapped Daniel awake. His head felt heavy, and his stomach ached with a deep, burning hunger. He forced himself up and walked to the door, expecting another Nutriloaf. But what he saw made him step back in shock. It wasn't a loaf at all. It was a bowl of something gray, mushy, and cold. The smell hit him first, sour, rotten, like spoiled milk mixed with wet cardboard. It looked like leftover oatmeal that had been scraped from the bottom of a pot and left out overnight. Flies buzzed around the edges of the tray. Daniel whispered, "They're trying to break us." Across the block, men shouted when they saw their trays. Some cursed, some refused to touch it. Others cried out in anger. One man yelled, "This is garbage! We can't eat this!" The guards didn't answer. They only walked down the hall, dropping trays without looking at anyone.
Daniel bent down and smelled the bowl again. His stomach twisted so hard he felt lightheaded. There was no way he could eat this. But if he didn't, he knew the hunger would get worse. The room felt smaller, darker, and hotter by the minute. He put the ball down and sat on his bunk, shaking. Hours passed. No guard came to check on anyone. No medical staff walked through. The prison was quiet in a way that felt dangerous. Then, in the afternoon, a loud alarm rang. Not the food alarm, not the movement alarm, a different one. One Daniel had never heard before. Red lights flashed across the hallway. The doors slammed shut automatically, locking down the entire block. Daniel pressed his hands to the glass window in his cell door, trying to see what was happening. He heard guards shouting, more footsteps. Then he heard someone say, "The note got out. The warden wants the whole block locked down." Daniel froze. The note, the one the worker inmate delivered. Someone outside the prison had it now. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small flicker of hope. But hope in prison came with danger. If the guards were panicking, it meant things were about to get worse before they got better. Later that evening, the lights in the block suddenly went out. Total darkness swallowed the cells. Daniel felt the walls closing in. Men shouted for help. Others pounded on their doors. Someone begged for water. The darkness made everything louder, sharper, more desperate. Minutes turned into hours. Nobody came, no answers, just darkness and hunger. Then finally, footsteps echoed, slow, heavy, purposeful. A single flashlight beam cut through the black hall. Daniel stepped back from the door. The beam stopped at his cell. A guard's voice whispered through the darkness. "Pack up your stuff, you're moving."
Daniel's heart raced. "Why? Where are you taking me?" The guard didn't answer. The door unlocked, and Daniel stepped out into the hallway. Men in other cells shouted, asking where he was going, but the guards ignored them. They walked him past the collapsed inmate cell, past the cells of men still banging on their doors, past the smell of untouched trays of gray mush. Then Daniel saw something that made his breath catch. A woman in a suit stood at the end of the hallway holding a stack of papers. She wasn't prison staff. She wasn't a guard. She was from outside, and she was looking directly at him. "Daniel," she said softly, "we got the note. You're coming with me." He didn't understand at first, but when he stepped into the hallway beside her and saw the badge hanging from her belt, everything became clear. She wasn't just anyone. She was an investigator. And she wasn't leaving the prison alone. Daniel realized the truth in that moment. The suffering, the starvation, the punishment meals. It was finally going to be exposed. As the doors behind him slammed shut and the hallway filled with voices calling his name, Daniel took one last look at the block where he had almost lost himself. Justice was coming, and this time the world would hear every word. Prisoners suffered in silence for years, but their voices are finally being heard. The cruel food punishments, the hunger, the collapse, it's all part of a system that was meant to break them. Daniel's story is just one of many, and the fight for justice continues. If you want to uncover more shocking truths from inside America's prisons, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, and comment below. Which story should we expose next?